Hello, and welcome to Zhinjio's Addon tutorials. We're working with Pitbull 4, and this is Module 4, called Working with Bars. So I did a little bit of prep work for this tutorial, this module. As you can see down here, I have my player frame with a couple of other bars that I normally turn off, enable, just for demonstration purposes, including the experience bar and the reputation bar as well. One thing before I get too far along here, I wanted to make a comment on the previous module. One of the things that I had pointed out in that module is that you can make a copy of the current layout, make changes to it, and then assign that in the units section here so that you can see the changes. But of course, it's also possible to assign it to the unit first and then make changes so that you can see those changes happening in real time. So thanks to Boda for pointing that out, and I'll just give a quick demonstration of that. So since this is the player frame and I don't normally like using the normal frame for anything, I'm going to make a new player layout here, which, as we talked about in the last module, is an exact copy of the normal layout. I'm going to go to my units. I've got my player unit selected, and I'm going to change that to player. Now back to the layout editor, and any changes I make to the player frame will be immediately obvious down here and visible as I'm working. So that's certainly a more intuitive way to see the changes that you're making to the frames in real time. Moving right along. So this module is all about bars and how to work with them. And so what I'm going to start out with first is positioning. In this particular case, I have all 6 of these bars stacked on top of one another. And so you can see how that functions. I'm going to go to the health bar. So again, in my layer 1 tabs here, I select bars, and I'm going to just work with the health bar here as an example. In layer 2 tabs, I select the health bar, and then we go to the position drop down right here. When I push that down, you're going to see that all the bars that are in the list are in the order that they appear in the stack here. So health, power, the blank space is this black one here, reputation bar, experience bar, and cask bar. So if I want to change the position of a bar, so let's, for example, change the position of the health bar that I'm working with right now, you basically tell it which bar you want to replace. So for example, if I wanted to move it down to this position, which is where the reputation bar is currently, I'd simply select reputation bar. It pops down to that spot, and then everything else jumps up above. So it's actually very easy to work with positioning as far as the stack is concerned, and you can move them around as you see fit and adjust them pretty easily. I'm going to move it back to the top here just to keep it consistent with how I normally view things. So that's this sort of stack concept for the overall positioning of the bars and how they appear on top of one another. There is one other element to positioning, which is the side of the bar. Normally, or at least to start out with as a default, all bars will have the side configured to center, which gives you this vertical, or this stack rather, effect of all the bars. However, you can also have the bars on the left or the right hand side. So for example, I'm going to move the experience bar and the reputation bar to the sides, just so you can see how that looks. So we'll change the side of the experience bar to left. As you can see, it now has a vertical orientation, and that's on the left hand side, and the reputation bar to the right. It's now on the right, and it has also, again, a vertical orientation. So this can be done with any number of bars, and you can change, in fact, the whole unit frame to be oriented in this way if you wanted to. But as a general statement, I generally like to keep the bars horizontally oriented instead of vertically. But again, this is just an option, completely by your preference. I know there's a lot of people that will have particular bars stacked that way. And I'll give you another example with blank space in a little while that I do sometimes use. So I'm going to switch everything back to center again. But that's the concept of sides for the bar position. Between those two, you really have quite a bit of flexibility as to how that will look. Okay, Let's move on to the size of the bars. The size of the bars is done via a kind of unique perspective from how normal UI elements are configured. Normally, in most configuration options, you'll see the size of something specified in pixels. And actually, if we go back to the general configuration, that's a setting here, the 245 by 105. That's a pixel height and width. So that's what I would consider a normal view of this. The bars do it slightly differently. The bars have a ratio. Right now, all the bars are set to a height of 1. Now, it's not 1 pixel. Instead, it is the ratio of the size of that bar to all the other bars. So if I want to increase the size of, let's say, for example, the health bar, when I change that to 2, that bar becomes twice as tall, or thick, or however you want to phrase that, as all the other bars. And all the other bars shrink slightly to make room for that now bigger or thicker health bar. And as I continue to move this up, you'll see that effect continues to happen. So now it's 3 times as tall, the other bars got smaller, 4 times as tall, 5 times as tall, and so on. So basically, this number gives you the ratio of the height of this bar to all of the other ones. So from a practical perspective, I would start with the height of all the bars at 1, so it is uniform, and then based on how you want them to appear in the unit frame, adjust just the height of the ones that you want to be bigger, and by how much ratio-wise. So there's quite a bit of configurability, flexibility I should say there, but it is a little bit non-intuitive when you look at that the first time. So just remember that's a ratio, and adjusting, I'll leave it at 3 or 4 here just to keep my, let's go 3 for the purposes of this tutorial. So that's sizing or the height of the bars. Oh, one more thing to mention about that. If you do have a bar set to the side, so for example, let's move the experience bar back to the left, you'll notice that instead of a height now, it has a width. But that behaves exactly the same way as the others. But if you change it to 2 or 3, it does adjust it by unit increments based on this ratio concept. So that still applies. Okay, moving on. Coloring. Coloring is pretty much the same for all the bars. There are some slight differences. I'm going to get into specifics when we talk about individual bars here in just a minute. But the basics for coloring, we'll work with the health bar here for just a moment. These 6 options right here, color by class, PvP by class, hostility, NPCs by hostility, custom color, and custom background, appear on all of the bars. Let's uncheck them all just for a moment, just so you can see how it looks when there's no coloring. When you have none of these checked, it's going to behave the way the colors are specified here in the left-hand side. These are the defaults. So you can see full health, half health, and empty health. So what's going to happen is, as your health starts decreasing when you're getting hit, it will go from green to yellow to red as that ratio goes down further. To demonstrate that kind of off screen here, I've got my equipment manager up. I'm going to equip some items that have a lot more stamina. So you'll see my health jump down. You'll also see the color change more towards yellow. So here we go. So there I equipped some stamina gear. And obviously my health increased by quite a lot. And now it's trying to catch up with that new amount. So it was more yellow, and as it continues to grow here, it's going to get more towards that green color of full health. And if I go back to no equipment, pops right back up to the full green color of full health. So this is the default behavior for health. However, I can color by any of these other methods. PvP by class, hostility, and NPCs by hostility are typically only used for target frames and other unit frames. So for example, party or focus or something beside yourself. The ones that apply to player are typically just the class or custom colors. So if I color by class, it will be, in this case, I'm a rogue, so the color will be yellow. If I was a mage, it would be blue, and so forth and so on. Again, those default colors are determined here in the class colors. Custom color, of course, I can make this any color I want. You'll notice when I check custom color, I get a new little color picker here. Selecting it gives me the typical color wheel, and making adjustments here will allow me to color that bar however I see fit. So maybe I'll go with like a dark red here. And then custom background allows me to color the background that appears behind the bar when I don't have full health. So let's make that really distinct. I'll go with a light blue. Right now I'm at full health, so you can't see it at all. But if I once again equip that stamina gear, now you can see that custom background poking through. So that's the basics on coloring. There are two more settings here that apply to coloring, or the bars I should say in general, and that's deficit and reverse. First thing is reverse. Reverse does exactly what you would expect it to. It simply reverses the left to right orientation of the bar. So in this case, if I check reverse, the health will fill from right to left, as you can see it slowly increasing now, instead of left to right. If you have your unit frames oriented in that way, you can certainly change that setting pretty easily. And then finally, deficit is, instead of moving full health by giving it the custom color, it will instead drain it and give it the background color. You might think this difference is fairly, negligible or what have you, and I would probably agree with you, but this is just another way that you can customize it. I don't typically use deficit, so it might have some different usages in other people's configurations or unit frames. But anyway, you have those options available to you should you decide you want to use them. Okay, so now we're back to full health again. Can't see the background as it's full. Okay, bar specific settings. There's a couple of things. We're going to go through these kind of one at a time. Each bar has its own, a couple of settings in it that are unique. Both the health and the power bar have two settings, animate and fade, which allow you to change the way the bar behaves when you have sudden drops in or changes in their value. So for example, when I was changing the gear, as I showed you before, and I had a sudden drop in health, you'll notice that it just popped all the way to the new value and basically didn't have any kind of transition whatsoever. However, if I set it to animate, what you're going to see is that transition is now smooth. Here we go. There. You notice how it kind of drains instead of just immediately popping to the new value. Fade is very similar. Instead of just draining like that did, it slowly fades away the value that you lost. So I won't demonstrate that one. Health in particular has a setting called fast updates. I was hesitant to even mention this in the tutorial because it is kind of a, it's almost an advanced feature, but I'll mention it anyway. After some experimentation with the way that health updates when monitored actively, there were several different methods for doing so, and they found a method, the coder found a method that was marginally faster, and when this is checked, that faster method is used. Now when I say marginally, I mean the difference between like 0.1 and 0.2 seconds to see an update happen in the bars. So this is fractions of a second we're talking about. And likewise, setting it that way will have a slight, and by slight I mean like in the nanosecond level, performance hit on your CPU, since it is attempting to get these values slightly faster than not having it checked. I've seen the difference. It is noticeable, but it is extraordinarily small, and if you just have way too much CPU on your hands and never experience any slowdowns in games and raids or what have you, go ahead and check that, and you might get, I don't know, some very slight marginal benefit from it over people who don't have that checked. Okay, moving on. Power bar. Power bar has one setting that is unique. It's hide on mana, hide on power. This is typically used not for a player frame, so it's not really all that useful for demonstrating on the player frame, but what it basically allows you to do is to hide the power bar if the unit that you're targeting does not have mana or does not have power. On the player frame, since I am a rogue, I do use power. Checking hide non power will have no effect. As you can see, the bar is still there. However, if I select hide non mana, you'll notice that the bar will disappear. So, again, this is more useful target frame or something else that's in the game world besides yourself. But nevertheless, those are unique to the power bar. Cast bar has a few settings that are different. Go down here. So most of this has to do with the fact that when you're not casting, you can have the bar hide itself. So first of all, this bar down here, which looks just like the empty space at the moment, is the cast bar. Mostly because I'm a rogue and I don't cast spells. But what you can do is set it to auto hide. So when you're not casting, the bar will hide itself. This is pretty useful. I would say that I almost always have this checked on my player frame when I'm a casting class. That way it only be visible when I'm actually casting a spell. Show icon basically allows you to have the icon that represents that spell visible either on the right or the left. Icon position determines where that is going to be shown. Again, it's not visible here right now because I'm not a casting class. And then finally, if you do not have auto hide checked, you can have the bar essentially adopt the background color of the frame when you're not casting. So when I check this, you'll see it move to the color of the background, like so. And again, I'm not a casting class, so those don't really apply to me, but those three settings are specific to the casting bar. Moving on to experience and reputation. You'll notice that coloring on these is nothing checked. So basically what is going to happen is the experience and reputation bars are going to behave like the colorings that are set in the colors over here. However, if you choose to, you can of course set those yourself. The experience bar has a couple of additional settings here, or one additional setting I should say. If you do set the color on the experience bar, there's this one here. Here's my new color picker. Let's make it something distinct. Make it green. That's not very distinct. Let's make it orange. Okay. You'll notice that there's also the rested XP section here, which by default, if I don't do anything with it, is basically a lighter version of the custom color. However, I can, of course, set that to a custom color as well. So let's set it to pink. And then you can see the differentiation there. But again, if you want to use the Blizz default reputation colors, then just leave those unchecked. And reputation has the standard colorings here, so that's the rep bar. You can make it custom whatever you want, or it will just use the Blizz defaults. Blank space. I wanted to spend a couple minutes on blank space. The blank space bar has a couple of interesting things about it. So first of all, blank space bar is this one right here. You'll notice that it's just this black, empty space. It can be used for a variety of different things. You can either use it just to force the bars apart, or one thing that I have done in my UIs, and I've set this to either the left or the right hand side, so let's use it to the right for now. What it does is it creates this little spot here now where I can anchor some of my indicators, like say for example my combat icon. I can anchor that to my blank space. Let's change the config mode so I can see it. And set it to top. And there's my combat icon. So as you can see, I've got this empty space here where I can position some of those bars and have a nice clean look to the presentation of some of these indicators as well. So that's certainly one thing you can do with blank space. The other thing to note about blank space is that you can have multiple blank spaces. Right now there's only one current bar, you can see here, default, but I can create another one. And there I go. There's another blank space, which can be positioned just like any of the others. Sized, has a height of 2 by default. Let's move that back down to 1. And I can do whatever I want with it. I can use it as again, just a spacer, or I can put some text on there if I want, so that it's not interfering with the other bars, or whatever you want to do with it. So quite a lot of flexibility there. If you don't want to use blank space at all, just disable it. Or if you don't want to use it in any of your unit frames, you can actually disable it here in the modules as well. And I think there's only one final thing I wanted to show on bars. That's in the General tab here. Spacing and padding. Spacing is the amount of space in between bars. So as I increase this, you're going to see the space in between each of the bars grow. Right? You can actually make it negative as well, which means your bars will overlap. That's not generally a good idea. And then padding is the space around the outside of all the bars. You can increase that as well. You'll see everything kind of get that border effect growing. So that's how you can set those defaults as well. The default texture, I'm going to get into textures in another module, textures and fonts, but this is where you can set the texture of all the bars. Only a couple different options here right now. And that's it for bars. Hopefully this has given you some insight as to how you use them, how to size them, how they can be positioned, and how to work with them. Hope you come back for some of the additional modules, and thanks for listening.